You're calm and comfy in your bed, dozing off to sleep, but as your eyes shut and your REM sleep begins, you start to thrash and toss and turn. Sounds like a horror movie, right? You wake up dead. But what if it wasn't a horror movie? What if it was very, very real?
What you are about to hear is believed to be real. Based on witness accounts, testimonies, and public record. This is terrifying and true.
I've always been fascinated by tonight's story because I'm a humongous Freddy Krueger fan. Yeah, the trash-talking dream demon from A Nightmare on Elm Street. That was a major part of all my formative years and probably explains my line of work now. I love the things that scare me, and I love to laugh while I'm being scared. But tonight's story doesn't have a lot to laugh about. It's real, and it's deadly, and it's completely unsolved. So get yourself comfortable as you prepare to learn how some people began to die suddenly in their dreams, and we still, to this day, don't know why. They also don't know if or when it will happen again. We're telling that story after these messages. The first time that I personally had been made aware of the Laotian refugees dying in their sleep was not necessarily the way you normally learn about world history and events like that. I learned about it when I was watching the behind the scenes for A Nightmare on Elm Street. That's right, the Freddy Krueger horror series that I hold so near and dear to my heart ever since I was a child. Just when I thought that Freddy Krueger couldn't get more terrifying, Wes Craven shared a story about what inspired him to write the classic and timeless terror tale. This is an excerpt from the documentary Never Sleep Again. Writer-director Wes Craven speaking.
The beginning of Nightmare on Elm Street really came to me with a series of articles in the LA Times about young men who were dying in the middle of nightmares. They were specifically from the Asian Rim. In this particular case, a young man had a severe nightmare and told his parents, "I can't go back to sleep, I'm going to die, I just know it." And the father was a physician and said, "Let me give you some sleepy pills." The kid didn't sleep the first night, and then in the second night, he didn't sleep again. And then it became clear that he was trying to stay awake despite everything. And finally, the kid fell asleep, and they took him upstairs and put him to bed, thinking, thank God, that little crisis is over. And in the middle of the night, they heard screams and ran into the room. He was thrashing on the bed horribly. Literally before they got to him, he fell still, and he was dead. In the aftermath, the parents found all the sleeping pills. He had not taken them. He had hidden them in the bed. And they also found a Mr. Coffee machine in his closet with a hidden extension cord that went to the nearest plug, which was, to me, it was just so out of a movie.
That story, however factual or based on inaccurate memories, took my mind and made it spin in overtime. So I decided I needed to know more about the true story. Over 100 Southeast Asian refugees died in their sleep across the United States in the 1980s. Many doctors investigated the case, stating that it could have been a heart defect, a powerful cultural belief in the spiritual world, a sickness, and many other factors. Laos is located in Southeast Asia and is the only landlocked country, which means it's not connected to the ocean. Myanmar, China, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand all border Laos. Vientiane is the capital and largest city of Laos. The main three ethnic groups in Laos are Lao, 53.2%, Khmu, 11%, and Hmong, 9.2%. Many Laotian immigrants moved to the United States in response to the Vietnam War when the communist government took power in Laos in 1975. By 1980, the Laotian population in the United States had reached 47,683, with an estimated number of 147,375 by 1990. The Hmong people were seen as traitors by Laos's new administration because they fled their country in search of a better life in the United States. Many of those who survived the war fled their homes in Laos to seek refuge in Thailand or the United States. Their journey to a better life for themselves was described as, quote, long and treacherous. Hmong refugees in the United States suffered the most from high rates of poverty and unexpected and strange deaths. In 1981, a Laotian refugee moved to the United States with his family after spending time in a refugee camp in Thailand. Yong Lang Tao, 47, died in his sleep shortly after arriving in America, with his wife heartbroken and confused beside him. He was the fourth Hmong person to die mysteriously in their sleep in the last 9 months. According to a July 14, 1981 article titled Mysterious Fatal Malady Striking Hmong Men, with the subheading reading, Sudden Unexplained Deaths Terrorize Local Tribesmen Resettled in the United States. According to them, the first fatality occurred in 1977 in Orange County, when a seemingly healthy young man named Lai Dao died in his sleep. Joanne Gill, a social worker who knew Lai Dao, indicated in the autopsy, quote, the cause of death was severe cardiac insufficiency. That was a fancy way of expressing they had no idea what killed him. The Orange County epidemiologist Dr. Tom Prendergast then received a call from a reporter in Minneapolis asking if they had any mysterious fatalities among Hmong men. Another call came in from Portland, Oregon, asking the same question as the first. When epidemiologist Dr. Tom Prendergast and his colleagues got together to figure out what was going on, they discovered that 20 people, 19 men and 1 woman between the ages of 25 and 65, all went to bed and never woke up. Quote, all were either found dead in the morning or were observed throughout the night making some grueling noises and in a collapsed state from which they could not be revived, they claimed. Dr. Prendergast and the federal public health officials began to investigate the inexplicable fatalities. Initially, they suspected that their deaths were the result of a disease that had spread from the Hmong to other populations. They quickly ruled out that possibility. The case of the strange deaths grew in popularity, prompting many people to develop speculations about what happened to them. Most people assumed that when the Hmong people immigrated to the United States, they experienced severe stress or culture shock as a result of having to relocate so far away from their home and adapt to an entirely different way of life in America. According to medical professionals, it was difficult to determine that stress was a major impact because stress affects everyone in different ways. The next possibility they looked into was that the victims were experiencing a delayed reaction to the North Vietnamese gas attacks. However, doctors never supported the theory, with one medical examiner, Dr. Larry Luman, declaring, quote, nerve gas does not behave in this way. There is no proof. Second, if it is nerve gas, why does it only affect men and only at night? One survivor of the gas attack reported that when he arrived at the hospital, he was in ventricular fibrillation, which indicates that his heartbeat was irregular. The lower heart chamber beats fast and uncoordinatedly, and the heart does not pump blood to the rest of the body. The patient received appropriate treatment as a result of the developed ECG pattern, which is seen in people who have had a heart attack. Dr. Prendergast examined the individual and discovered no evidence of heart artery disease. Many Hmong people believed that they were being punished by the spirits of their ancestors for fleeing their homeland. According to another doctor, Dr. Quote, "The inability to do right by your ancestral spirit is because you're not there, or because you don't have the necessary things to do the right rituals, and is centered around anxiety." Other doctors said that their deaths were caused by Oriental Nightmare Death Syndrome, which indicates that they died as a result of terror induced by a nightmare. They then identified the inexplicable deaths as Sudden Unexplained Nocturnal Death Syndrome, or SUNS, which is an abrupt cardiac arrest in young adults while sleeping at night. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta, Georgia, has studied this cause, but no one understands how to say that SUNS killed the victims. Another doctor has returned to the idea of stress being a part of their death, positing, quote, "Was that a reflection of what kind of pressures come with being forcibly removed from a familiar world to a completely alien and often even hostile context?" Fast forward to many years later, and there has never been a confirmed explanation for how so many individuals mysteriously died in their sleep. But following those deaths in 1981, no more fatalities were reported, which is, in and of itself, rather unnerving. Many people believe that if the CDC couldn't figure out what killed those victims, then who could ever solve the medical mystery of what killed the Laos refugees? The more cynical side of my brain wonders if the reason we never got to the bottom of this mystery may have had something to do with some lingering xenophobia and misconceptions about East Asian people. Please remember there was a long stretch of history where Chinese people were not allowed to immigrate to the United States of America. And of course there was the Japanese internment camps, although that was tied to a global war, so maybe that's not entirely related to xenophobia and fear. But when I heard that term, Oriental Nightmare Death Syndrome, the first thing I thought of was how back in the day when Chinese restaurants were popping up everywhere, people started claiming that they were getting headaches from monosodium glutamate, or MSG. MSG is a common flavor enhancer in just about everything you eat, and it's pretty much impossible to be sensitive to it, but people would claim that they got headaches from consuming the MSG, which was originally discovered, for lack of a better term, by the Japanese. However, when people started claiming that MSG would make them sick, it was coined Chinese restaurant syndrome. I'm glad we've come so far. Think about it. In this day and age, no matter how elderly and small-minded a relative could be, well, I'm sure they'd like to go get some egg rolls with you. In the end, what really matters is most of those people found a safe place to live. Terrifying and True is narrated by Enrique Couto. It's executive produced by Rob Fields, produced by Daniel Wilder, with original theme music by Ray Mattis. If you have a story you'd like us to cover on the program, send us an email at weeklyspooky@gmail.com. And if you want to support us in a very direct way, go to weeklyspooky.com and click on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can support us and allow us to keep the spooky rolling and rolling and rolling. And I want to say a big thank you to our Patreon podcast boosters, folks who pay just a little bit more to hear their names on the show. And they are Bobbletopia, Megan Hua, Julia Kirsch, Christopher Sullivan, Brent McCullough, Gino Lyons, Steve King, Karen Weemet, Jack Kerr, and Craig Cohen. Thank you all so very much, and we'll see you next Monday.